RS 660, Take 2.
What a beautiful day it has been, and what a beautiful bike, the new Aprilia RS 660. I gotta tell you, I was super happy when this motorcycle came out, and I'm super happy that I could test this motorcycle, and it fills my heart with pleasure to see that Aprilia reincarnated this breed of motorcycle which seemed to be long lost. I'm thinking about motorcycles like the Suzuki SV650S or the classic inline 4-cylinder 600cc supersport motorcycles, which died out in the last years or were not anymore available as new bikes. And Aprilia came with a model which reinterpreted this type of motorcycle, a bike which is positioned in the midsection or the mid-sector, but with sporty feeling, sporty seating position, and sporty motorcycle riding without the necessity of being overly powerful, overly fast, and with that hard or not as easy to approach. Aprilia took their systems or the technology what they have, and they just scaled it down in those fields where it really does not matter too much for a speed category as this bike has, but retaining all the other good features. What I mean with that is that Aprilia always has been a leading manufacturer in electronics and suspension, chassis feel, seating position, and they really kept all the essence of that in this motorcycle. It's common sense that a bike which is positioned in the midsection or mid-sector does not cost as much as a top-notch superbike does. And with that, many other manufacturers used to take out many important features and especially safety features which Aprilia did not take out in this bike. For me, it's a really sympathetic approach to the topic of taking your system, taking your technology, but saving only on those components which are really costly for the manufacturer. So with this bike, you have a scaled down engine, fewer engine components, fewer precise or fewer expensive engine parts which are required for top performance, and also cheaper suspension components which of course give you a slight drawback but do not come into play too much as the bike is not reaching speeds where those are really needed. But on the other hand, once you have an ECU system, once you have the electronics and the sensors set up in a motorcycle, they do not take out the safety features and the great electronic features, which is really unique in this category. So you have a motorcycle with the whole Aprilia electronics package there is. You have traction control, you have wheelie control, engine brake control, cruise control, or blipper or quick shifter up and down, and nothing is left out. And the other great thing is that also with customizable riding modes, you have the ability to switch around from electronic setups. And also, what I have to point out, Aprilia is still the only manufacturer who allows you to configure your electronic setup the way you want it, and they stay the way you want it. And the other big thing is that once something is off, it is off. Also, in a mid category motorcycle as this one, which is super cool, super approachable. You really can customize the bike to your needs, and other motor manufacturers, so basically every other manufacturer, has the tendency that they have pre-configured riding modes and they interfere with everything else. But here I can set up the traction control independently from the wheelie control, the engine brake, the throttle response. Everything is customizable to your needs, which is a top-notch superbike feature. And also what I want to point out is that those are all features which help you to be safe, to experience the limits of the motorcycle step by step, and not being over not being challenged too much, and you choose your own approach to how you want to experience the bike. And this is just amazing that this bikes, especially for beginners, also gives you this freedom, but gives you also the safety net, which in my opinion is a big shame that auto manufacturers cheap out on those components in their bikes, where you have safety components only in the top-notch bikes which are positioned for a more mature audience. And I think that's a big shame. But why wouldn't you keep the safety features, especially for bikes which are also used by beginners, because they are the ones who need them the most, and here you just have them. Other than that, I want to point out that the design of this motorcycle is so beautiful. Once it came out, I was immediately in love with it. I gotta tell you my honest opinion that this new design language of Aprilia just comes so beautiful into place with this bike. And for me, whenever I see new Aprilias, I always think of the RS 660. And this is also maybe a big positive for this motorcycle, that a mid-section motorcycle looks like the top-notch V4 motorcycles. On the other hand, of course, it can be a drawback for the big motorcycles that they look like the mid motorcycles or the smaller motorcycles. But nevertheless, once you have this one, from the visuals, you belong to the big boys, which is beautiful. Also, I want to point out that the headlights and the LED headlight system which Aprilia applied this year is beautiful. It is super nice. You have a switch where you can turn on the show-off mode, more or less, where only the LED daylights are illuminated and not the main headlights. But also in night riding, the main headlights are beautiful. You see so much. It is really a big improvement. And then again, I'm thinking about beginner motorcyclists who have a day of night riding, and they just have the comfort of having a beautiful top-notch big bike headlight system design, which is just amazing. What the bike retains, so let me say it differently. You have a bike where all components are fit into place to feel like a big sporty motorcycle. With this one, you sit in the right position, you feel the right things, you experience how it is, or you emulate it to a very good degree on how it is to ride a big bike without reaching speeds, without reaching a region where by default it could be dangerous because the speeds gets higher and unexperienced riders will maybe be overwhelmed by speeds of a V4 Aprilia, and you just have a much more approachable concept with this one. You have still retained all the experience with it. The only thing which really you have and like I want to point out, it's not a drawback. It is just an engine or just a system which does not go as fast, which does not push for the limits as much as the V4s does, and you just have a more approachable system, a more approachable bike, um, where everything is not as how should I say, not as harsh, not as nervous. It is very forgiving, very easy to use, and you, by default of not having that much power, also speaking for this concept, you learn how to get a fluid line, how to get smoothness into your riding, because then you can still keep up with the big bikes, especially on the street, and you just learn how you take the bike into corners, how you take it on a beautiful, nice line without going into dangerous territories. And this is just amazing for this motorcycle. It's just amazing how you keep this learning curve. You sit on this bike, you ride it for a few years, and afterwards you are perfectly prepared to switch to the V4 big bikes, and you are just set for the future, which is incredibly good. We have to talk maybe a few small or negative aspects on the bike, which come into play, of course, when you have a a concept which is reduced in the power, and there I feel like you when you want to compare it with speed performance of super sport motorcycles, um, we gotta stay true to the fact that this is not a bike which is made for decreasing lap times, which is not necessarily made to be in competition with the inline four-cylinder 600cc motorcycles. Nevertheless, like I said, all the learning curves, all the feeling, all the sensation is very much retained. Also, the we're coming with this approachability of this motorcycle, we're coming with this this easy access to it. It is very much suited for street riding, for touring. Like I said, you have a cruise control on the bike, which I used when we did the highway sections where we went for big distances from A to B. And this is just amazing to see that back in my day, 10 years ago, when I started motorcycling, all those features were very much kept to the premium high-class motorcycles, the expensive motorcycles. And it's just, why shouldn't the mid-size bikes have those features? Why shouldn't beginners start with having those features and experiencing this accessibility, the comfort of a concept like this, which is just amazing in my opinion. What I want to point out, or maybe also a point of criticism, I like to say this is not Aprilia's fault, it's just emissions regulations. They get stricter and stricter, noise emissions get more strict, and what really a big shame in this bike kinda is that the sound is dampened. The emotions of it are filtered out to some degree, as the bike, especially when you go into higher revs, the engine sound is primarily coming from here, from the airbox region. And to me, having experienced the older bikes and having experienced the bikes which are allowed to be noisy, which are allowed to breathe freely, usually have the exhaust note coming from the exhaust, like the word says, and this is just filtered out in this concept. You have all the sound coming from the airbox, and to some point, for me, it feels a bit artificial. It takes out this bit of emotion. I mean, if you start with this motorcycle and haven't experienced how it was back in the day, you will not miss out on anything. But it really is a shame that those things are just not available anymore, not applicable with today's emissions regulations. And yeah, I just wanted to point out what a shame that is. Other than that, what I want to say with this test or to this bike is that I'm super happy that there is a concept, especially for two major use cases. The first being young riders, beginners who are in a search for having a big bike, the first big bike, but a sporty seating position, who want to position themselves in a sector, or who want to maybe go for racetrack riding in the future, or just like the optics, the seating position of a sports motorcycle. And with this one, they have a top-notch system for doing that. And the others are people who like the super sport motorcycles from the older days. The inline 4-cylinder 600cc bikes is for, especially if you want to ride them majorly on the roads, this is just the best system out on the market, in my opinion, for that, as you retain all the feeling of it, all the sportiness, but without the drawbacks of the inline 4-cylinder 600cc bikes, where you have to go up into the revs, where you again are forced or pushed by the bike concept itself to go into regions where it just gets uncomfortable, maybe where speeds gets higher. Here I especially talked to this with my cameraman, Mr. Nice Rider, who's been riding a CBR 600 RR 600cc super sport motorcycle for a long time, and also his first impressions were you get on the bike and you have the engine, the 2-cylinder, which have the torque down below. It's just so easy to approach, so easy to go out of the corners, to get on the bike, feel comfortable with it. And this is just such a big improvement in the sector. And if you are used to having the 600cc super sport bikes, it's a treat to switch to something like this. So thinking back, if I was 10 years younger and I was to start motorcycling, and if I had a rich dad who put this bike into my garage and maybe take me on 1 or 2 track days, man, I gotta tell you, I would have been the happiest teen there is. And I just can't imagine how many young riders will start motorcycling, start having the first big bike with this one. And I gotta say, thinking of that, I definitely am of the impression that, or I would say, is that the future belongs to the youth. With somebody who can start with something like this, experience the Aprilia DNA, experience the Aprilia feeling, and having a big, long motorcycle career ahead of them is such a treat. And I'm super sure anybody who does that will fall in love with motorcycling, will fall in love with riding bikes and experiencing the emotions which we all love. And that is just something I'm really happy to, that people can experience that in the future. So the future looks bright, in my opinion. This is the Aprilia RS 660. This was V4 Maniac. If you liked the video, leave a comment, give a thumbs up. This is V4 Maniac. Cheers out.